Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Nelva Bryant of When Pets Fly. I'm here today alone. Greta's not with me, but the show will go on. I'm here and we'll have a great guest with us today to discuss things. Actually, this one is going to be related to health certificates, which are very, very important. But before I get that going, let me introduce myself and share a few things with you before we get started. Again, I'm Dr. Nelva Bryant. I'm a veterinarian. I work in the airline industry, and I've been working with Delta Airlines since around 2018 time frame. I was brought on staff to help review and revise the policies for animal transportation and to ensure all animals get to their destination safely. Be aware that the transportation of animals by cargo, and that's what I really focus upon, guys, is highly regulated. And to be there and work with an airline to ensure animals get to their destinations, complying with these regulations are extremely important. And I value that role that I'm playing with Delta. So that's what I do with them. Now, in the meantime, though, I started noticing some things that pet owners potentially could do. Actually, they need to do to ensure that their pets get to their destinations safely if they're traveling by cargo. So I developed When Pets Fly as a means or platform to share pet-centric travel education. And I started that back at around, say, 2020 timeframe, and definitely have grown. Started initially as just a Facebook group, and have expanded. I have a website. I have a social media presence on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and YouTube. And I do newsletters on a quarterly basis. So I have a lot going on in reference to that. We started doing these Facebook Live events. Actually, it's been 4 years now that we started these. And we do this to share information. Actually, as I say, sharing information with everyone, with different stakeholders in the animal transportation industry and how they impact. It could be pet travel, zoo animal transport, or what have you. So it's basically just talking with the different stakeholders that are significant in ensuring animals get to their destination safely. So today, again, won't be any different. But before I talk to I bring in our guest, I want to bring up a topic that I'm sure you guys are wondering about or considering. And it's in light of our present situation that we're dealing with right now with the governmental shutdown, and then also our recent knowledge of, say, diminishing of restriction of flights that are going to be traveling now, as far as flights that are going to be available, that we're going to be dealing with that. Be aware, the governmental shutdown, yes, that does impact the transport of animals, especially being that, again, I maybe briefly mentioned the transportation of these animals are regulated by multiple federal agencies. It could be CDC, USDA, APHIS, or depending on the type of animal, it might be U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services if you have an exotic pet. So be aware, getting permits, health certificates, or what have you that's needed for transport may be delayed because of this, the governmental shutdown. So you're going to have to start planning early. And then also now with knowledge of the restrictions of the number of availability of flights, that can impact also the number of flights that are going to be available. So be aware, it's the present situation does impact pet travel or animal transportation in general. So be mindful of that. So I think this would be a great segue to bring on our guest, who is Aaron Avery of GVL. And again, Aaron, say hello for a second and then I'll introduce you. But thank you for being with us today, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Bryant. Really, really excited to be here. As Dr. Bryant said, I'm the CEO of Global Vet Link, and we support Dr. Bryant's mission of being able to have pets move internationally. And we just come at it from a little bit of a different angle versus the entire logistics process. We focus on one area, and that is focusing on the vets. There is a huge piece of international movement that, as everyone knows who flies a pet, it's all paperwork and logistics, but that paperwork often has to be completed by a vet. And so my job and my company's job is to work with veterinarians to make that part of their life easier so they can focus on exams and providing care and allowing pets to travel that much more efficiently.
Yeah. Let me share with you. I don't know if you're aware, I've done clinical practice since these past few years. I was doing part-time with Banfield, and trust me, it is difficult for veterinarians to juggle everything that they're doing on a daily basis, because you might see you have appointments, you have surgeries to do, and then all of a sudden you have a health certificate that's detailed, and to sit there and change your mindset, that's really difficult. It's really difficult. So having GVL available to assist with that process is really very, very helpful in the whole process. But yeah, so what are your thoughts on that? I think that's great that you're available to do this.
Yeah. So what we found over time is you're exactly right. Veterinarians have to, it's this context switching that occurs when I'm working with pets all day in clinic, and all of a sudden somebody comes in and says, and by the way, I'm going to Portugal next month and I need to take my animal, or I need to take my dog. And oftentimes the vet's like, I don't even know where to start, right? There's a ton of regulation in the US, and there's even more regulation depending on the country of destination. And I think you talk about it all the times. I've seen on your podcasts and on your lives, but it's so country specific, and it's time of year dependent, and it's airport specific. And what we do is we take the guesswork out of that, because again, my job is to make sure that pets leave on time and get to where they're going. And a big part of making sure that happens is that the vet can do their job well. And so it's education, but it's also workflow. And what we've decided through all of this, over thousands and thousands of animal movements that we've facilitated, is there should be another solution where we just handle all of the paperwork. So we have our software platform, and then we also have what we call our concierge service, or a white glove service, where we have somebody in our team actually working with the vet and working with the animal owner to get the right information at the right time and make sure that it's populated in the right places on this paperwork and on this administrative documentation so that pets can fly.
Oh, that's perfect. You know what? Let me slow down again. This is where I miss Greta, because she makes me slow down. Let me slow down a minute. Let me introduce you too before we get started. So this is Aaron Avery. As he said, he's definitely the CEO of GVL, Global Vet Link. It's a digital animal health compliance software type system where it specializes in making sure, as far as all the documentation that's needed for animal transportation. And you guys do more than just dogs and cats, but for animal transportation, all the documentation is in order for their transport, whether it could be domestically or internationally. Aaron was previously involved with multi-site healthcare consolidation and principal investing. And also you live now in Boulder, Colorado, is that correct?
That's right. Yep. So I'm coming to you from Boulder today.
Excellent. That's like I said, I'm sorry, folks, we're a little bit delayed because I think we got off a little bit on the time frame too, because we're in different time zones, but we're with you to share information. But again, Aaron lives in Colorado with his wife, a new 5-month-old daughter, and a 9-year-old cockapoo. And he's an avid outdoorsman and endurance athlete. So welcome to the show, Aaron. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. And if Greta was here, we would have our applause little meter going. But I'm sorry, I don't have anything. But I'm happy. I'm happy you're here and share further with us. So now we have you introduced. We can dive deep in and everything, but is there anything else you want to share about yourself? How did you get into this? That's actually, as far as with animal health.
Yeah, so it's a niche that I didn't know a lot about, but I had worked on multi-site healthcare on the human side for a number of years, and this opportunity came up, and I thought, what a great opportunity to go and kind of work on the software side and make the lives of the folks in multi-site healthcare, but specifically in vet, easier. We have a cockapoo, as you mentioned, and we lived in Chicago for a time. And while we were there, he had IVDD. And so he had to undergo a ton of surgery and recovery. And through this, I saw an opportunity to work with vets. And this was an opportunity at Global Vet Link that allowed me to do that. And so grateful to be here. I feel really privileged. And a shout out to my team at Global Vet Link. Good. They make everything that we do every day possible. Good.
So tell me more. Let's see, you told me there. Tell me more about Global Vet Link for those who may not be familiar with. And again, we have a wide audience here. A lot of veterinarians are definitely familiar with Global Vet Link, because I do know that you guys have contracts within the Banfields, and I'm not sure if it goes to the VCAs, but I know you have a contract with the Banfields. So all Banfield veterinarians are very familiar with Global Vet Link. But tell me more about GVL.
Yeah, so GVL is in 20,000 clinics across the country. And that is our goal, is to be a solution to take the hard work off of veterinarians from a paperwork perspective and automate that so they can get back to providing care. And so a lot of customers that are moving with their animals, like I should say animal owners, right? Pet parents, they actually don't know GVL. They might get their GVL certificate that comes from their vet. And we sort of try to stay behind the scenes and work with the vet. So our customer is the vet. We try to empower the vet and make it so that this is one less thing that they have to worry about when they're focusing on sending anybody with their dog internationally or their cat internationally. And then we also work with some of the folks that you've had on your lives before, like Brett Furlong over at Starwood, and
Yes.
many of the other pet shippers in the United States. We work with them again on the paperwork side so that they can focus on the logistics and making sure that the animal is in the right place at the right time and they make it onto that flight and they're in the right cargo bay. And so we found that that's a gap and a need, and that's explicitly what we focus on serving.
Definitely. I can tell you, let me tell you some things that I've seen in the airline industry that, as far as health certificates in the past that came through, that of course it was not correct. But because again, folks don't realize these health certificates are actually they're governmental documents. I mean, they have to be completed by a USDA accredited veterinarian. And the stuff I've seen over the, not recently, but years when I first started working with an airline industry, I've seen health certificates on veterinary letterhead. I've seen some things where it's like, wait a minute, that's not official documentation. If it's on veterinary letterhead, it has to be, remember, because back then it was the APHIS 7001 form.
Yep.
And to see something on a veterinary letterhead saying that the animals, it's like, that is not valid. But no one was checking. No one was paying attention to follow the regulations, because the regulations say it has to be a certain way. And it wasn't being done because there was no one looking. So yeah, I can tell you, moving forward, we make sure that everything is officially, as far as the documentation, and done properly, because it matters. And this is actually the health certificate requirements for pets going by cargo is a USDA regulatory requirement. So imagine if USDA comes in and inspect and they don't find the correct documentation for these animals, that's bad. So again, to ensure airlines making sure they're as far as complying with regulations, and it's important to have a veterinarian there that knows what they're looking for and say, hey, this is not right, and make sure it's done properly. So, but it's amazing. If no one's looking, what was being used as an official health thing.
It's crazy. Before GVL, we found that some of the documentation had reject rates as high as 40%. And as you said, Dr. Bryant, like, it's a federal document. Yeah. And the USDA has to sign off on every pet that is leaving the country saying, this meets the requirements of the country I'm going to. So if I'm going to Germany, there's specific requirements that my pet has to have from a vaccination perspective, as I know you've talked about. And there's certain timelines that I have to meet as a pet owner with those vaccination records. And so GVL helps support that. And we found that before, veterinarians didn't really have a process or a standard. And so the rejection rates from the USDA were as high as 40%. And again, what happens when that occurs is a pet's not going internationally. And I either, as the owner, as the pet parent, I can't go, or I have to go without my pet and I have to find emergency care, and they don't get to come with me. And so it was a big problem. And we felt that there was a huge opportunity to help.
Perfect. And also think about it this way too, even in the airline industry, if you give the airline a document and they don't know what they're looking at, or if it's an appropriate document, they can let it go forward and it gets to that destination and then it's denied. And then think about coming back, the monies, the inconvenience, not say inconvenience for the pet, but look what the animal's going through. I mean, the welfare of that pet during that, that's a lot to deal with, to be going and confined and then trying to come back to the US. That's a lot for them to deal with. So all these things were happening years ago when no one was really paying attention and making sure things, there was compliance with these regulatory requirements.
That's right. That's right.
Amazing. Definitely amazing. So let's see. What's our next question here? Tell me more. How does it fit into the pet travel ecosystem? I mean, you mentioned that you've worked with pet shippers, which is awesome. You work definitely with veterinarians, but what else? Tell us more.
Yeah. So I think what we find is when pet parents come to us and they need help moving an animal or flying with their animal, we provide one specific part of that, right? And that is working with vets and pet shippers, but primarily vets, because there's accreditation and legal requirements to get the animal on the plane and traveling internationally. And so that's where GVL really fits in. And so anytime we have a pet parent come to us, we tap our network of 20,000 veterinarians based on where they live, or if they need a veterinarian that's not in our network, we can work with that veterinarian to make the vet's life easier. And so again, my goal here is to really take paperwork certainly off of the shoulders of the animal owner, but more so the vets, because what I see in the industry is veterinarians are constantly working long hours. They're stressed out, and they have, you know, really high churn rates and frankly something that nobody likes to talk about, but really high suicide rates.
Right.
And it's a function in a lot of cases of burnout and of increasing burden on the vet's shoulders to just do everything. And so my goal here through all of this is to make a product and a workflow that makes the vet want to do health certificates and excited to do them and excited to help their customers get from point A to point B. And usually that's internationally for cats and dogs.
Yeah. You know what? That is great. But you know what? I think there needs to be some more education. I mean, I know you're working directly with veterinarians, but in general, pet owners need to be aware that the health certificates itself is not just a certificate. It's going to contain a lot of information that's needed to meet those requirements for that destination. But that information is not just a sign off of the thing. It might be a diagnostic test, a rabies titer that's going to take a while to get done. It might be microchipping the number for that. And you know, there's an order between things. You have to microchip first, then give the rabies vaccination either the same day as the microchip or the day afterwards. If that's off, oh my goodness, you got to redo everything. So they need to understand a health certificate is not just a form. It contains a lot of valuable information, test results, like I said, microchip numbers, the vaccination records. It's extremely important. And, you know, and most pet owners, what happens is they'll come within 10 days of travel because, of course, the airline says it must be dated within 10 days of travel. So that's a time frame they'll come looking for this document. And it's impossible at that point. So if there's some way we can get pet owners to understand the significance behind it, and start planning ahead. And then another thing I think people, the misconception with health certificates is they think that it means their pet is healthy, and that's not what it means.
That's right. I think it's worth pausing here and parking for a second around what you're saying, which is, why as an animal owner do I care about a health certificate? Why do I need this? And I think if we go back to the perspective of the governments that are moving animals around, it comes back to the fact that we just as any other country we don't want a sick animal entering our country and perhaps then spreading disease or virus to other animals. And that is really why, when you talk about the process and the timeline, that is so important, because some of these vaccinations take a little bit of time to administer, and microchipping, and to make sure that the animal has taken up that vaccination well. It's so important from a disease traceability and an outbreak mitigation perspective to be able to have healthy animals moving across borders. And so I think if we come back to the why is this important as a pet parent, that's really the reason. It's sort of doing each individual's part to eliminate or stop the spread of disease and make sure that we have healthy pets and healthy parents as a result. And I think you've talked about this before, but it's not just like one dog is getting loaded into the cargo hold of the plane. That dog needs to be healthy, and that cat needs to be healthy, because they are around many others. And so the way to ensure that we are disease free, right? You're right. A health certificate doesn't mean an animal is healthy, but a vaccination certificate or a health certificate is looking for specific things that the vet is able to qualify and say this animal meets the requirements to move internationally. And I think that's the really important piece here. It's not for just government formality or for regulation, but it is for the greater good of the country. And we see this in Japan. Japan doesn't have rabies. They have eradicated rabies from their country, and they've done that because they're very specific on what animals they let in and how those animals are quarantined and what type of certificates and vaccinations they have. Yeah.
Well, I love that you said that, and that's perfect. I have to start thinking of it that way too. That was perfect. I brought up the idea of healthy with them is because sometimes pets will have underlying medical conditions, and they'll get the health certificate. In their mind, that meant their pet is healthy, but that does not mean that their pet is medically fit to fly.
Correct.
So one thing I think veterinarians do this whole process as far as traveling domestically or internationally with your pet, going by cargo, definitely make sure they're medically fit to fly. And again, the health certificate doesn't mean they're medically fit. It's two separate things we're dealing with. When we say health certificate, and as you mentioned, we're talking about infectious diseases. We're talking about not being able to transmit that. But if your pet has diabetes, heart disease, or something like that, that's not being assessed. So my thought is, again, don't think that document means they're healthy. Please check with your veterinarian and make sure your pet is medically fit to fly and they don't have any underlying conditions that can become exacerbated during transport. That's my point I was making.
That's a great point, and I totally agree. And you're right. That's not something that shows up on the health certificate, and only your veterinarian is going to know from history and from doing the right exam whether your pet is fit to fly. So extremely important there. And that's not an infectious disease related topic. And so the regulators and the transporters are less concerned with that. But I, as a pet parent and anyone listening to this, should be concerned with that, because that can have just as dire consequences as an infectious disease.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Well, here's another question. How do you guys are definitely, you're not a pet shipper.
We're not a pet shipper.
Not a pet shipper.
Yeah.
But I think but you interface pet shippers.
Right. So the pet shipper handles really soup to nuts. They're handling everything from working with the customer, the animal parent or the pet parent, to working with the veterinarian, to working with the airline, to transporting the animal to and from the hold at the airport, and making sure they are getting on their plane and they are received at the destination. And that serves a critical role. GVL was previously a part of IPATA and attended several of their international and regional conferences. And the pet shipper community is absolutely incredible.
Yes.
Our job is to assist the vets and assist the paperwork, and also then therefore work with the pet shippers to make sure that the veterinarians those pet shippers are using are getting the correct documentation to the pet shipper who is facilitating the overall move process. I think when we think about, from GVL's perspective, when we think about moving an animal, you have a pet shipper or you have the pet parent that is doing it themselves. The pet shipper takes out a lot of the guesswork and a lot of the challenge for the pet parent. But in either case, we're there to support the veterinarian to make sure the veterinarian can get the right health papers done at the right time and sent to the regulators, the USDA in this case, for approval.
But you do have some things with GVL. I remember you had Fly With My Pet or something. You guys have something that's more forward-facing to assist pet owners as well, correct?
That's right. Yep. So we have a website called flywithmypet.com, and that has sort of an outline of everything that a pet parent would need to do. And again, we support that pet parent connecting with a vet or finding a vet on GVL's network that can handle the documentation. So if you as a pet parent want to fly with your pet domestically or internationally, and you don't really want to use a pet shipper, which is totally your option, that website can help the pet parent understand all of the requirements. And then the pet parent would use that website to find a vet and work with the vet. GVL handles that paperwork on the back end. And then in terms of booking the flight and the logistics and the travel, that would be on the pet parent. They could also use a pet shipper for the logistics and the travel.
Yeah. Well, as I've had a conversation with another pet shipper fairly recently, it is so complicated as far as really trying to get the best route for your pet. I had someone ask me how to get I have a veterinary colleague that was asking me how do she get her daughter's little, I forget what type of, I think it was, she's going to be moving to Italy with a little lizard, forget the type, but you would not believe how much we went through trying to figure that out. It was very, very difficult and very pricey for a little, I forget, gecko something. And it's expensive. I mean, thousands, about 2,500 is going to cost it one way to get that shipped to Italy and everything. And it's amazing. So, and how she found it, because I was trying to help her to do it, but my avenues, I just couldn't figure it out. So she went to a pet shipper and they finally, a reptile shipper, and they figured it out for her. But can you imagine that?
Reptiles fly cargo?
Yeah, they can.
Wow. I did not know that.
It depends on the airline. Not all airlines.
It always depends on the airline.
It depends on the airline. Yeah. Yeah.
What are you seeing, Dr. Bryant, in terms of, I think you talked a little bit around, hey, what does the government shutdown mean for moving animals? What are the early reads on that you're seeing right now for how that might differ from previous times where government was open?
I don't think I don't believe we're having an impact on it as far as the government should shut down, because if you think about it, what we're doing, we're after the documentation and everything that's needed. I don't believe we're seeing much changes in reference to that. But I brought it up unless really to just share that for, say, if you need a health certificate for your pet and it's traveling out of the country or coming back to the country with CDC's importation regulations, be aware there might be some delays in reference to that. That's why I brought it up. But from our standpoint, I haven't seen anything in reference to it right now. I would imagine, though, we're going to probably see some changes now that they've determined that we're going to have some restriction on flights at major airports and everything. I believe that's going to impact us, but I haven't. This is the first day, basically, so I haven't heard of anything in reference to this pressing for us. But I would imagine that we're going to see some changes, some diminishing numbers that are going to be scheduled, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, but no. Yeah, we're in a very interesting time in reference to it. But I brought up the topic initially because I just think that we all should understand that everything that's happening in this world right now is definitely, it's going to impact pet travel in reference to it. And for those that are going to be traveling with GVL, well, that's a question for you. Have you noticed any changes or delays in reference to the governmental shutdown, in reference to getting your documents cleared and to the veterinarians? Have you noticed anything?
So we haven't noticed anything explicitly right now. Mm-hmm. What I can say is I was at the USAHA meeting, which happened earlier this week, and what that is for your viewers is a meeting where all of the state annual state animal health officials get together from all 50 states and discuss policy and progress and what's going on in the industry. And they are really focused on disease traceability and animal health. And we didn't hear a lot about how the shutdown's going to affect movability or the movement of animals. What we did hear is funding's pretty hard to come by right now. And usually the USDA shows up pretty heavily to this conference. And there are a lot fewer USDA folks there this year because of the shutdown and because of funding. And so what I think we'll see in the near to medium term is just an increased focus on how we think about what's important as it relates to traceability and the movement of animals. And again, thwarting any potential disease outbreak from the perspective of the regulators and as government.
Yeah, it's very interesting time, scary. And you know what? And I'm glad you brought up the traceability. I don't think people really realize the animal transportation, and we're not just saying dogs and cats, but other animals that are being transported domestically or internationally. We have to worry about disease spread and hopefully prevent the introduction as far as coming into the U.S. or domestic transport of anything that could be really highly infectious in the different animal species. So the traceability is very, very important for us. And again, I don't think people realize the extent of all that, but it's significant. It's really significant. We want to be safe.
It is. It is. And one thing that I like to think about, just to put it into perspective for folks, is the pork industry in the U.S. is a $50 billion industry. And a lot of these state vets really care about the pork and the beef and the poultry industries because that's our food supply. And basically overnight, the pork industry could kind of go like that if there's a disease outbreak. And so it's really and we're seeing these diseases come from international origins, and often cases from the south, kind of in the Mexico area, and then internationally outside of North America. And so it's really important that we track not only cats and dogs, as you said, but all animal movements to protect the food supply and protect a large part of the economy. And I think our mission extends into that. And so I feel really privileged to be able to help folks with that, both on cats and dogs moving internationally, but also the food supply and domestic movement.
Yeah, what we don't need in the U.S. is any foreign animal disease. It's foreign because it's not here in the U.S. It's not here, or it's been eradicated. So we don't need any introductions because, as you said, it can devastate certain markets. Our agricultural industry can be devastated by the introduction of a foreign animal disease, which we don't want. So that's right. Everything that's going on is so significant right now in our lives. But we get off that. What bright spots do you see in the industry itself as far as pet travel and everything? What do you think?
I think the industry has come such a long way in just the automation in sort of digitalization of moving animals. And so it is despite it still being challenging, it is so much easier now to travel internationally with my cat or dog than it really ever has been. And I think we're also seeing that reflected in the numbers of folks electing to do this. You're right, it is still fairly expensive, and it is a whole process for folks to move an animal. And cargo space is expensive, right? And most times internationally, an animal is moving in the belly of the plane. But what I've seen is it's been largely democratized and much more efficient. And so I think there's a lot of folks in the industry, a lot of these players we've talked about, the pet shippers, the veterinarians, to thank for that, because they've made caring for pets and therefore being able to bring pets with us on destinations much easier than ever before.
Yeah. My goal with everything I do is to kind of, in a sense, bring animal welfare into this transportation, because animal welfare, we think about it. I've seen certain sectors that think about it, say before travel or once they get to their destination, but making sure animal welfare regulations and everything is in order for the animal during this whole this process. Stressful process. Think about it. Stressful for us too when we travel, but to ensure animal welfare during this process of travel is extremely important. And that's what I've been trying to do. Again, chime in with everything to just focus on that pet while we travel or prior to travel, so it'll be safe and get to their destination safely.
Yeah. I'd flip the question back onto you. Where do you see bright spots and opportunities in the industry right now?
I think there's opportunities really to expand as far as when I say pet-centric travel education, extend it into the different industries. Well, not say pet-centric, animal-centric, and focusing on transportation into the zoo animal industry, research animal industries, shelter animals, as far as transporting shelter animals. Everyone's into rescuing pets, and I think we should rescue them during disasters or what have you that happens. But let's not forget that time period of when they're traveling by air. Let's make sure they're done properly too, because there's things that I've seen some photographs of disaster missions and how they rescue them, and I'm like, that probably wasn't the best way to transport them as far as considering animal welfare.
Right.
Again, you want to get them out of the disaster, yes, but you want them also make sure animal welfare regulations are being met. And I think to some extent, sometimes they're not even thinking, they're just trying to just get them all together and get them out of there. So I don't know.
Right.
You got to wait out. Is that, I don't know. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I'm trying to consider animal welfare during transport is what I'm focusing on and everything with it. But I think there's plenty of opportunities in the future, and I do think it's a bright thing. And it's just, again, shedding light on the animals and what they're going through and ensuring they get to their destination safely and ensuring animal welfare regulations are being met.
I totally agree. Welfare is huge, and I actually think it's come a long way in terms of the treatment of animals, especially in air travel. Even in the last few years, I think it's been a focus of the airlines, and I think they've done a really good job. Yeah,
no, we're working hard with it. Definitely working.
We have you to thank for that in a lot of instances. So thank you.
I think
turn on the little
I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate it. I love the opportunity that I have, honestly, and I see, as far as another bright spot future, I see that I envision that airlines will start seeing what veterinarians can bring to the table for them as well. And it'll be more veterinarians, hopefully, in this industry as well. So as of right now, I think I'm the only one that's doing it. And it was an interesting skill set. I came in a skill set that helped me with it because I had a regulatory background coming into it, but I've learned so much more. It's amazing the things that I've learned in reference to it. So I think there's more of us that's needed to work together and collaborate, because it should never be, in my opinion, it should never be a situation where if another airline has a veterinarian that we're competitors. I don't think we should be doing that. I think if others get in the same similar situation I'm in, or same role that I'm in, we should be collaborating to ensure animals get to their destination safely. It's all about animal welfare and their safety during transport, and it should be a collaboration, is my thought.
That's right. I agree.
Yeah. So what challenges do you see as far as what challenges it's emerging in the pet travel industry?
Yeah, I think where I see challenges occurring is I think with the availability of routes and of options. And I think it's a huge undertaking for an airline to fly a pet. And the primary purpose of commercial aviation is to move people.
Right.
And so I think with the complications that are already existing on the human side, it becomes that much more challenging and that much riskier. Frankly, it's a liability to move an animal. And so I think we're still working, and I know you especially are, but we're still trying to understand, and the airlines are still trying to understand, in large part, how do we do this? How do we do it efficiently? How do we do it at scale? And how do we make it make sense for our business as an airline, and also make sense for the animal owner and the pet parent? And
Right.
so I think we've seen over time, we've seen this ebb and flow a little bit, where more airlines have elected to move pets. And then we saw the pandemic, and coming out of the pandemic, I think fewer airlines are electing to move pets, especially internationally. I think domestically, we see it costs, like to do a domestic flight with a pet, you're paying $150 or more for that pet to sit in a crate underneath your seat. And if that pet's not small enough to sit in a crate underneath your seat, they have to sit at your feet and potentially people next to you. And oftentimes this one-way $150 ticket is more expensive than it is for you as a human to fly. And so I think there is some challenges economically and some challenges with space constraints and policy for these airlines around how do we think about the movement of pets, what qualifies as an ESA or a certified emotional support animal, or a certified a service animal, right? Like there's a difference. And I think that's still a gray area that we as servicers of the industry and veterinarians, and then also the airlines, are trying to figure out.
Yeah. We can stop here and talk about a lot of different things. Let's see. One thing you mentioned is, as far as initially, this is a commercial airliner that their focus is passenger travel. That's number one you have to consider. So adding in pets, a lot of people say, why can't pets go in cabin? Why can't there be more? Why can't they sit in the seat? Well, number one is, the regulations as far as pets in cabin, or the emotional support animals, that went away. I think it was 2021 timeframe. So that went away. So if you see a pet in cabin, they're going to be in a soft-sided carrier thing, and this, your seat, underneath your seat, basically, or you'll see a service animal, and that's it.
Correct.
Service animals, even though you might see photographs of them sitting in the seat, they ideally are not supposed to be there. And I'm sure during transport, they will not be sitting in the seat because they're not supposed to be there. And your pet in cabin in a carrier is not supposed to be out for safety reasons. But imagine, and folks are saying, oh, there needs to be more pets on cabin, but for safety reasons. And I'm sure they limit the numbers due to safety, and there's reasons why, precautions. God forbid. I mean, we've had it. I mean, these past few years, there has been accidents that's happened where they had to evacuate the aircraft. Imagine if the aircraft was loaded with a bunch of pets, dogs that were outside of their carrier during that time. I'm sure evacuation would be done as smooth as I've seen in the past. So you've got to start considering some things also on the airlines side, as far as maybe why they had some limits to certain things. Not saying there can't be a change, but there's limitations. They're there for a reason. There's one thing there. There's got to be a reason why they limit the numbers, and they don't limit the number of service animals. They can't do that, anyway, which is because it's with that person that needs that service animal. Right. But for pets in cabin, there's got to be some reasons why they limited the numbers and stuff. So something to consider. Yeah.
I think it's challenging, right? ESA went away, as you said. Now we have service animals. You can't limit the number of service animals. Folks are thinking about, well, is my animal a service animal?
Yeah.
Some cases it's a blurred line. In many cases it's very clear, yes or no. And so that adds a layer of complexity. And then again, human and animals, the primary reason that commercial airlines exist is the movement of human passengers. And so you start to encroach on people's space when you have a dog, especially if it's outside of the soft-sided carrier. That's even though it may be a service animal, and I think the regulation is very clear as to why service animals need to be present and can be present, but it also can challenge other passengers and other customers. So it's a constant give and take, but I think that is a challenge for the industry, and it's good to talk about, and it's good to understand that, and also keep a pulse on where it's going.
You know what I think, though, what makes it challenging for everything right now is social media, and how you see TikToks or memes or reels, and it shows these things, and it gives you an impression. And then with AI now being added in there to generate certain things as far as what you see visually, it's giving just the wrong impression. I saw something where it was reel, or I don't know what you call these things. Sorry, but it was something on social media where someone was trying to go through the TSA line and they had a goat. And I'm like, goats, no, goats can't go in cabin. It's not an emotional support animal. Then another one had a capybara. I don't know if you know those are the largest of the rodent species. So big capybara. And they said, this is my emotional support animal. It's like, no. But when you see these things, and since people kind of at this point now believe everything on social media, to me, we can be advancing and really advancing where we're getting the knowledge base out and the right way to do things. But someone will look at that and say, oh, I can bring my emotional support animal on board. Like, right. No, they changed that regulation in 2021. So it's like, right. We progress, and then all of a sudden we get kicked back because people believe everything they see on social media. And I just wish we can get factual stuff on social media, Yeah,
it's definitely a challenge. But I think that's part of why you exist and why folks can come to you for the right information, and understand whether or not they can take the animal on board or put it in cargo and how that works. So right. You're playing a vital resource role here in the air travel economy.
Yeah, thanks. No, it's challenging though, but I love it. But like I said, there's aspects of what we deal with on a day-to-day basis that it's like, oh my goodness, this information is out there. But I guess, that's how it is. But my goal for everyone is really for you to really understand the facts and what's really required. And really at one point in time, it may take years, that you'll know exactly if I'm traveling domestically or internationally with my pet, I know exactly what I need to do. That's and how to get them prepared, and knowing the documents and the importance of the health certificate, as we mentioned earlier, get all that. And it'd be just like secondhand knowledge.
I totally agree. And we're headed in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the differences between the documents, because we always just say health certificate, but actually there's, in a sense, two types, right?
That's correct. Yeah, there's the International Health Certificate, which is pretty self-explanatory, and then there's the Certificate of Veterinary Inspection. The Certificate of Veterinary Inspection is often required for any animal really, to move between states. And so that does apply to cats and dogs oftentimes, right? The interesting thing with that is it's quite state specific. So certain states have requirements for certain types of animals entering their state, and what sort of health papers, if you will, or documentation these animals must provide to legally enter the state. A lot of airlines, and I think most airlines, for an animal moving domestically, they require an affidavit or some sort of health declaration or health certificate, or at the very least rabies documentation and that certificate on file for the animal to move, even if that animal is moving as a service animal. So though there is no cap on service animals in an aircraft, the regulation and the paperwork still exists to make sure that animal is healthy should any adverse event happen while on board.
Definite. Oh God, I thought of a question I wanted to mention here. Let me see. Keep talking, because I'm just something that's popped in my head, just popped back out. But no, as far as the health certificates, go ahead, keep going. Sorry, I went blank for a second.
Sure. Yeah. No. And so on the international side, you usually have everything that's required on the domestic side, plus a formal international health certificate based on the country of destination that is specific to that country that needs to be completed. That is always by a USDA accredited veterinarian, and it is always endorsed or approved by the USDA before travel occurs.
Yeah. What I wanted to mention is domestic travel. Be aware that a lot of times people think that traveling to Georgia to New York is the same as traveling from Georgia to Hawaii. But please share as far as our requirements going to Hawaii and probably Guam, Puerto Rico, and other U.S. territories, that the requirements are a little bit different, and you need to pay attention to that. Correct?
Correct. That's right. So Hawaii is an island nation that is, an island state that is extremely tight on its regulations for entering with an animal. And they almost consider an animal from the contiguous U.S. a foreign animal for the purposes of travel. So Hawaii has very specific documentation and requirements. We call it a Hawaii Health Certificate because it is specific to the state. That must be completed, again, by an accredited veterinarian in order to go to the state of Hawaii. And that for them is a way to ensure that they are free from rabies and other infectious diseases.
Yep, perfect. Because out of the United States, it's the only rabies-free state. So you have to meet those requirements. Folks, don't think that you're going to do a weekend trip to Hawaii with your cute little Chihuahua and it's going to go with you. If it does not meet the requirements, it's going to be turned away, and that will spoil your trip because you will not be allowed it. Actually, it might. I'm not sure. I would imagine you have to sit in quarantine and wait for you while if you're there, or you might have to just turn around and go back. So you have to really prepare and be aware that, again, even though Hawaii is domestic, it is U.S. There's additional requirements for pets going there. So.
Correct.
Now, there's a lot folks have to understand and realize as far as transporting their pets. It is not as simple as you just get up and go. And and I think the reason why people do that, and I think it boils down to people don't really consider their pets as animals, number one, as potentially sources of diseases and infectious diseases. I don't think they think of it that way either. And almost they're thought of like just property and he's going with me, but you have to realize there's regulatory requirements. There's diseases that they could potentially transmit or obtain. So you want to make sure they're safe when you're traveling domestically or internationally. You need to make sure they're safe. And again, completing this health certificate with all the requirements of the vaccines, that's a definite need when you're traveling.
Yeah, I think a pet and my dog too, a pet's part of the family. But in the eyes of the regulator, an animal is an animal. Yeah. And animals can, as you said, transmit diseases that humans can't, or can carry diseases that don't express themselves in the same way that a disease would express in a human. And there's no way for that animal to communicate with the human population that they don't feel well or they're sick or they have a disease like a human likely could. And so that's really why it's important. And in the eyes of the regulator, an animal is an animal, no matter how big a part of the family they are.
Oh yeah, definitely. And you've got to be important. I would say when you be mindful too, when you travel anywhere, domestically or internationally, when you return back home, please always remember to have your pet checked and monitored upon return. Please also just remind your veterinarian that they have traveled, because sometimes what if your pet develops some clinical signs that's totally just unique? Because remember, they're going to a country or a destination that's in a sense could be foreign to them. There may be diseases that's not endemic where you live, but they go there and now they're exposed to it. And they come back home and they develop signs. One prime thing I can think of is off the top of my head is leishmaniasis. When you go over to different countries in Europe, it's transmitted by a sandfly, and they can come back and potentially have that. So you want to be mindful of those diseases. Going to Mexico fairly recently, they're worried about screwworm infestation, New World screwworm. So monitor your pets when you go to these different countries upon returning, because there could be diseases that they can bring back, and that's not good. So again, if you travel out and come back home, remind your veterinarian of where you've gone with your pet so that they can kind of in their mind start thinking of potential foreign animal diseases that are not prevalent in the U.S. that they could have been exposed to.
That's right. And one anecdote on New World screwworm, the federal government is really concerned with that because that can be transmitted into livestock too. And so that can affect the food supply. So it can affect cats and dogs, animals we consider pets, and also animals that we consider food. And so it's a really big concern and focus for all of the states, particularly the southern states that share a border with Mexico, and also the federal government as it looks to protect the food supply of our nation.
Definitely. Yeah. And I believe that's been, I forget what year, but that's been eradicated in the U.S. for quite some time now. And another thing potentially too that can impact, I believe it can impact us too. If you can hate to say it, but somebody fall asleep out and they're exposed to these flies and they are the only ones that are like flesh. I believe they go on viable flesh. They don't really focus on decaying flesh. It's so they can impact animals, like you said, livestock and people too. So you gotta be careful.
Correct. Yep.
Man, oh man. Well, I think we've discussed a lot. Anything else you want to talk about? Again, you've done some amazing things with GVL. Again, you said you're focused on veterinarians, the pet shippers, but also, again, you do have a sector of your website where you focus on pet owners that want to transport their pets on their own and kind of be aware of the requirements there. Anything else you want to share with us, Aaron?
Yeah, no, I think I feel really fortunate to be able to chat with you and kind of spread the good word here. And I said it early on, but GVL is made up of people, and we're doing something for a group of other people. In this case, it's veterinarians and shippers and animal owners. But the team back at GVL are the real rock stars, and I get to be the messenger today to show all the cool work that they've done. So we really appreciate it. Thanks for having us on, Dr. Bryant.
Oh, I'm happy to have you guys here, and I really have high regards for what you're doing. And I personally actually work within your system as far as developing, getting health certificates or international health certificates for our clients and everything. So it's a very good system to work with. It makes it a whole lot easier for veterinarians to go through it, and it just relieves some time. Because again, when we're working in practice, trust me, it's just so many things you're juggling at one time. So it's nice to have a way to kind of streamline and get this process done quickly for us. So thank you.
Thank you for that vote of confidence. I appreciate it. Shameless plug there. We'll take all we can get.
Well, thank you. Any other questions you have for us or anything, comments you want to make before we go?
I think that's it from my end.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Aaron. I definitely appreciate interviewing you. I believe we shared some valuable information for everyone today. So please, again, if you want to follow Aaron and GVL, he's got social media information here. And thank you. Thank you for being with us. And thank you for joining us, folks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.